Factorio, a game of factories, a game of automation, a game with such complexity just to ultimately launch a rocket. A lot of this seems to be daunting at first glance, but maybe I can show you that your first playthrough is easier than you think by watching me do a first playthrough. Greetings everyone, Wickman here, and at last, I'm bringing back EXP Journal, the series that you may learn from my gaming experience. So, I'm starting to like automation games. Last year, the majority of the streams I've done covered a really large Minecraft mod pack called Divine Journey 2, where the progression is gated by heavily modified and costly recipes. In order to effectively progress, you have to invest into automation. Now, does this basic premise sound familiar to me? Indeed it does, because there's Factorio. But what is Factorio? So Factorio got its start in mid-2012 with its first public release by its three founders, and hopefully I'm saying their names right, Michal Kovarik, Tomasz Kuzelik, and Albert Bertolin-Soler. Together, they founded Woob Software and went through many years of development with starting funds from an Indiegogo campaign and selling early copies until eventually it was officially released on version 1.0 on August 14th, 2020, and even got a Switch port late last year. As of now, the team increased to a size of 31 members, both in-house from Prague, Czech Republic, and remotely from across the world. So what is this game ultimately about? Well, you are an engineer that crash-landed on a bug-infested planet, and you need to take advantage of the planet's resources in order to build a rocket and escape. While the idea seems fine, getting to that point is what sells the game. You got mining, transport belts, assemblers, inserters, science research, oil, the list keeps going, and it doesn't stop there. Thanks to the modding API, there's also a wide range of mods that you can use, from quality of life like a recipe book, or big overhauls like space exploration. Fun little fact, one of the inspirations for Factorio in early development were two popular Minecraft mods at the time, Buildcraft and Industrial Craft. This makes a lot of sense now. So for someone like me who played modded Minecraft, why haven't I played this sooner? Well, I have a little bit of history with this one. I originally played this game once in July of 2017 while it was in early access with my friends Mike and Cand. And did I have a good learning experience then? Well, no. It was honestly overwhelming with two other players taking the helm, and I was doing very little to contribute. Then the fact that I was also streaming, so you can imagine the pressure that I was feeling when trying to learn this game. So I haven't really looked up into this game for a long time, but jumped to 2022 where I actually gave it another shot. For 2 streams and I got sidetracked again. But now, this is 2023 and I'm wiping the slate clean and ready to tackle this game proper. For this playthrough, we'll be going for default settings on every option with the exception of research queue availability set to always. However, this isn't going to last long as I'll be making a change to a different setting later down the line. And here on screen is the world that I'm going to be starting in. For anyone who wants to play in this particular world, the seed is included in the description. So with all this said and done, let's begin. As a side note, the face cam is originally not meant to be recorded into the footage, but because OBS was not cooperating that day, you're going to have to deal with it for a little bit. It'll be fixed on its own soon. So for the beginning, there really isn't much to input on my thought process, as this part is pretty straightforward from what little I've played prior or from content that I have watched. Nonetheless, I'll share with you what the progression is like. So first things first, if you're hopping directly into free play, if it hasn't been enabled already, go through the list of tips and having to check them off as you go along. Otherwise, I would recommend going through the pre-made campaign first in order to get yourself situated with what the game has to offer. In fact, it's even part of the demo if you haven't bought the game already. Another big tip for you is do take your sweet time having to understand the controls for this game, as there's definitely a list of keyboard shortcuts that's going to help you out immensely, such as manipulating items through the use of control and the mouse buttons, placing down a ghost version of an entity with shift and left mouse, or by pressing Q for the eyedropper tool to quickly grab an item from your inventory that corresponds to the entity out in the world. And I'm mentioning about these controls for a reason because I am quite the oddball when it comes to where I place my movement keys, which is down a row. And this game is the exception where I have to play on default controls because this game makes use of the control functions to copy, paste, cut, or undo anything within this game. So I have to bite my tongue and having to deal with that crap. Sigh. But anyways, getting ahead of myself, what do we do first? Well, it's important having to survey the area with what resources that we have immediately available to us. That being our ore deposits, iron, copper, coal, and stone. Taking what we have immediately available to us in our inventory as well as whatever we salvage left over from the ship, we can straight away go ahead and make use of a burner mining drill with a stone furnace to do a very simple automation of having take the stuff that we mined and input directly into the furnace and having to occasionally provide coal. Speaking of coal, survey the area if you can find yourself some huge rocks, as they'll contain not only stone, but coal as well, to jumpstart your process. If you need something more immediate, there's also trees as an option for fuel as well. And there's a very good reason as to why this starting area has a whole bunch of trees. We'll mention that later. Once you get a starting amount of resources, you'll basically want to rinse and repeat handcrafting your drills and stone furnaces and having to lay out more of them, especially on iron. While it is important to have a wide array of resources, iron especially is important to really jumpstart everything, such as setting up our first major power source, steam. Much like ore deposits, you wouldn't have to walk far to find your first body of water to start creating steam. With it, we make use of an offshore pump, a few pipes, and we got ourselves an array of boilers and steam engines. Obviously, this needs a fuel source, so at this point we're introducing our first major transportation option, transport belts. Once it's fully connected and adjacent to the boilers, we rearrange the drill so that the output goes directly onto the belt and makes its way down to the boiler. But as you guessed it, we have our next step in our automation, and that is inserters. That way the boilers are automatically fed when needed. Now there is an earlier version called the burner inserter that uses fuel instead of electricity, but since the process of setting up electricity is so easy, it's easily skippable. In fact, it's so easy, next we just create a bunch of small electric poles, place them adjacent to the power source, and create a long line of poles leading up to any devices that accept electricity. You can even hold down the mouse button as you're placing them and it'll be placed at the maximum distance possible. So now with electricity, we can make use of better machinery such as electric mining drills, which have better area coverage and speed. But most importantly, we are now able to use science labs, which involves the main game mechanic in order to progress: research. This will allow us to unlock new recipes and bonuses so long as we provide the labs the needed amount of science packs. Select a technology to be researched, insert the packs, and watch the floodgate open. Automation will likely be your first choice, as now we want to try and let all of the crafting work be done by machines. But before we do, we need a steady supply of iron and copper through a design called a smelting array. Luckily, I already had a rough idea on what it will look like based on what I've seen before. And I can accomplish this using two new types of belts, splitters and underground belts. With it, I'm able to split the incoming iron on one side and underground belt the coal and split on the other side. Now the inserters can grab both materials on one side of the smelter and output the finished product on the other to a belt going outwards. We'll also have to repeat the same layout for copper, but we can take out the guesswork and use the aforementioned control functions to copy and paste the smelting array. So, with the resources ready for crafting, ladies and gentlemen, this is where the easy stuff ends. Because we're now going to be doing a thing that is a guarantee for new players to do, including myself. Spaghetti. Oh God, the spaghetti. Let me explain. This is a learning method where you go about laying down what you know so far to make a particular task to work. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad, you just want it to work. In this case, we want to prioritize automation science packs, or red packs for short, since we always want to be doing research. Through the use of assembling machines, we assign the following prerequisites of copper plates and iron gears, which in turn requires iron plates. While I'm at it, I've thrown in transport belts as we always want more equipment readily available. Then, it's all about figuring out the layout with the belts and inserters. This is the part where some players see this as solving a little puzzle, which is something I can see to an extent. Once it's all set up and functional, I decided to do a daisy chain design with the labs so the packs are sent from the front to the back. But I noticed that one machine is not enough. We need more science. And this is where the term ratio comes in. In this game, ratio is referring to item production that is functioning at an optimal rate. And that involves math. If you're not a fan of it, then just generally pay attention to the throughput of items and adjust as needed. But at some point you'll want to do some basic math to understand the amount of items per second, and pinpoint any bottlenecks to fix. Sometimes looking at the production menu is all it takes. Or just use a calculator. It's a game, for God's sake, not a math test. So I simply went for more assembling machines assigned to red packs. Now we're getting somewhere with the research. I even put up some lights for the occasion. You know what would also be good for the occasion? Actually having game audio. Yeah, so far this whole time, game audio wasn't being recorded. This wasn't an editing style choice either. And this was like my first stream of 2023, and it clearly just made me sad. But maybe you can hit the like button if this video was helpful to you. That would make me happy. Thank you. Now before we tackle the next project, there's something about our factory we need to be wary of. As we continue to add more machines and things running consistently, the factory will produce pollution as a byproduct, and there are some not so kind locals nearby that will take offense to that. Introducing the biters, a bug-like species that will attack you and your factory when provoked by your pollution, by any means necessary. Hence why we have military options for attack and defense. This now becomes a balancing act of growing your factory, managing your defenses, and attacking nests when needed. To periodically monitor the biters as well as the map as a whole, we have radars that continuously scans around its location and occasionally reveals and updates distant locations around the map. So it's good to have multiple around the base, but be mindful about its power consumption. I mentioned earlier why I chose this world, and that is because my starting area is enveloped by trees, and trees can help cut down on pollution. This actually makes it a very forgiving mechanic for slow learners, as sometimes your machines may not always be active, giving your area more time to reduce pollution. But better safe than sorry, so I started a quick smelting array for a patch of stone down south to create some stone brick, to be made into walls later. While it's doing that, now we need to figure out logistic science packs, or green science. Red science might have been easy, but green science will add a few more steps. So continuing with the spaghetti method, we build around the current line of materials and work from there, completing the steps of making copper cables, electronic circuits, and inserters. Luckily, we already have belts being produced. Some of these steps were made possible with a new type of inserter called the long-handed inserter, which, given by its name, has a longer reach. Once I got the chain of production figured out, it's just a matter of setting up the assembly machines, belts, and inserters, so the green science even sits next to the red science on the same belt. I even threw in a machine to make some magazine rounds for me. All while dealing with a frickin' cliff giving me limited space. Oh yeah, space. I'll touch upon that later. So afterwards, I did some routine checkups on some machines, add some more power, build some turrets, setting down the walls, placing radars, and even attacking nearby nests to prevent future invasions. But there's a reason for it. I hit a wall. It's very likely that new players will end up feeling frustrated or overwhelmed, since this game requires a lot of thinking, a lot of planning, so much so you don't know what to do first. Hence why I did random tasks just now. The main problem for me is that my learning environment was not defined very well. I was told to start out with having to avoid other people's blueprints, which I'll talk about in a later episode, doing all things tactile with the spaghetti method and not caring about how it looks, and for me, allowing the chat to backseat me. All of this wasn't comfortable for me, and I needed to make a change. I don't want to harp on this issue, as it could get very lengthy and even to the point that I'm complaining, but my point is this. We all learn things differently compared to other people, and it's preferred that we lean in on their strengths so that the experience is all the sweeter. So what my approach will be during a later episode is that I will still attempt to do things hands-on first, aka the spaghetti method. If I get hung up on it for too long, I will look at some examples of designs to gain inspiration and try again. I will also only ask Chad for help when I genuinely need it. And if I'm still stuck, then I will use a blueprint. There really is no point in staying stuck if it's only bringing me frustration. So I should use any option of knowledge available to me to get better at understanding all of this and to progress. At the end of the day, it is a sandbox game. There is no right or wrong way to play this game, and I want to stay true to that statement. And if that statement resonates with you as well, then stay tuned by hitting the sub and bell. I'll see you next time.